We're back to the Wisconsin road trip, everybody. On the last episode, we took care of all of the tasks in the north part of the map. On this episode, we're going to take care of everything that's down in the southwest corner, starting with the mobile telephony task. We're going to take the Derry down there and hook up to a low saddle trailer that's already loaded with an oversized cargo. Let's get started. I'm using the Derry for this job because it's a heavy class truck, which also has access to heavy class winches. And that might come in handy because we're going to take the off-road route to get over there. It also has a wide wheelbase, which might come in pretty handy for this job. We're going to head through the railroad crafting zone and take this back road that goes all the way up to the end of the tracks. The first part of this trip is going to be fairly simple. We just have to cruise down this back road. Nothing too challenging about that. And the trailer that we're looking for is all the way at the end of it. This was the reason that I left the high range gearbox installed, just to make getting over there a little bit easier and quicker. But if I had to do it again, I probably should have installed the off-road gearbox, just to have a little bit more torque for pulling that heavy trailer up through the trees. But this one will get the job done. I almost missed my turn here, so you gotta stay to the left, and there's an old railway warehouse up here at the end. Now when you first come out of the trees here, you're gonna see this locomotive on the tracks. And that's actually a contract that we have to complete later on. We're going to need to pull that down the tracks to the railway station. But we won't worry about that right now. We just need to pull in here and get turned around, and you can see that trailer back there in the corner. That's the one we're pulling out of here. So let's get hooked up to it, and I'm going to back up just a little bit so I can get a better angle pulling out of here. You can see the drop-off is not far away, but we'll have to drive down the tracks a little ways and cut through the trees to get over there. You could also take the dirt road back the same way we came in, if you didn't want to do this the more challenging way. And that way is a lot easier, but it's just a longer trip. I'm going to take the shorter route. So leaving here, we're just going to get on the tracks and follow them down. There's a couple of problem areas that I will point out as we go, so pay attention. I'm going to try my best to get up on top of the tracks going through here, because the ditches on the sides get kind of steep a little further down, and there's a swamp off to the right here that if you start to drive down into that, there's a pretty good chance you'll end up tipping over. So try to avoid that. We can just knock down these trees that have grown up in place here. They're all breakable. And then once you get down a little ways, you can see the marker off to the left where we'll need to turn up into the trees and take this back road. This is the part where it probably would have been a lot more of an advantage to use the off-road gearbox. The high range was really struggling to get up this hill. Low gear worked just fine, but it was really slow. The Derry isn't the most powerful truck, but it is pretty stable. And like I said, it has that heavy class winch, so if you get into any issues, you should be able to pull yourself through the deep spots, or at least be able to grab a tree quick to keep you from flipping over. This spot right through here is where I usually always tip over. There's kind of a hill off to the right that pushes you hard to the left, so just watch out for that when you're going around the corner. But once you get past that, it should be fairly good from here. Now you can drive down and follow the road around, which would be a little bit safer, but I kind of like to just cut up to the left here, follow the edge of the tree line, and it shaves some time off. Alright, now we just got to follow this road all the way up to the top, and the drop-off is right up there. Once again, the Derry started to power out going up this hill in auto, and the off-road gearbox would have probably done quite a bit better. Another potential option that we've already discovered on the last episode is we probably could have used all-terrain tires on this truck and it would have gotten up this hill with less issue. I did leave the chain tires on, and they have a 3.0 off-road rating, which is most of the issue trying to climb up these hills like this. A little bit of tire slip might have helped out in this situation, but we finally made it up to the top. We'll get this turned in, and the trailer also needs to be turned in here. So once you deliver it, both of them will disappear. Let's jump back into the garage and we're going to grab the big cat, and from here we're going to work on the only for the worthy task. There's a big crane truck that was heading to the fuel storage warehouse, and it flipped on the way there and fell into the trench. So we're going to go yank it out and deliver it. The crane truck is a P12 and it's really heavy, so that's the biggest reason why I'm using the Cat for this job. It's pretty good at rescuing trucks because of its weight and stability, and it has the power to do it. And I'm also bringing a medium log bunk on the back of it, so we can use it for another job after this. So we'll just follow the same road up that we took on the last one, but this time we're going to turn off before we get to the end. I've attempted to do this task with a lot of different trucks. I would say the medium-sized trucks are going to have the biggest struggle for it. They just don't have the weight or the winching power to get the P12 out of there. The big Cat is a pretty good choice, but you could also use another heavy class truck in place of it. The biggest reason I'm using this one is so that we can utilize it for a logging truck afterwards. So we'll turn off by this house and we're going to take this little prairie trail back here, or 2-track, or cow track, or ATV track. No, just cut all of that. And if we go down a little ways, we'll find that P12 tipped over in the trench. Just up ahead. And there it is. Now, if you've ever done this task, I'm sure you know that this truck feels extremely heavy trying to get it out of here. It's tipped over in a really bad spot, so getting it back up on its wheels is pretty tough. Usually what I try to do is pull the front end of it uphill, so that way when you do tip it over, you're not really leaning on the hillside with it. It feels very top heavy. I used to go up the hill to the left there and try to get it pulled up onto its wheels without pulling it up the hill first. And you can get it up, but it doesn't like to stay up. So by getting the front end of it pulled uphill a little bit first, it should help out with that problem. Now we can just back up and hook up to the side of it. We'll get it up on its wheels and then we'll turn it on and it should drive itself out. But for some reason the front bumper got wedged into the ground and it flipped it right back over. So I'll have to repeat that process. This time I'm going to pull the front end of it a little further up the hill. And driving around down here is really unstable. That's another reason why I like to use the Cat. Less of a chance of it flipping over. But like I said, this time I'm going to pull the truck further up the hill. Just give it a real good yank. There we go. That looks like it's far enough. And now when we flip it over, I don't think it'll get stuck in the ground like it did the last time there. So once again, I'll just hook up to the side of it. And once you get it up high enough to where the engine will turn on, get it fired up, and it should drive itself out of there. There it is. All right, let's connect to the front, and we're gonna pull it up past the sawmill and down to the southwest corner to the fuel warehouse. This first hill driving out of here is probably the worst part because even the Cat will start to power out going up it. So when that happens, just let go of the P12, try to get up over the hump, and then you can reconnect to it, and it should pull out of there. Very good. Now we can just get up on the road and we'll follow it all the way down. There is a Yeti that lives out here in the woods too, although I've never been able to find it. If you have, let me know in the comments. I've looked for that thing so many times. Okay, let's just go through the sawmill. We're gonna break down the fence on the other side, and we'll follow this trail down to the bottom of the ravine. There's kind of a mud hole down there, but we've got a pretty massive truck with really big mud tires, so I'm not worried about getting through there. I guess the main thing that you really want to watch out for is just try not to tip the P12 over going through here. It's kind of tight quarters and, you know, it can be a struggle to get it flipped back up again. The P12 does have all-terrain tires, even though they're not very high on mud rating. They do help out a little bit because of the weight that the truck has, and the all-time diff lock. And if you get stuck on that stump right there, you'll probably need to just back it up and hook up your winch to the other side of the truck, if it wasn't already. There we go. Now we've taken this path a couple times going through here, and that small bridge is just up ahead. This time we're not going to go over the bridge, just because it's going to add a layer of complexity to the situation and give another opportunity for the truck to flip over. So we can just drive right through the ditch on the left side of it. It's quite a bit easier. And we're getting close to the drop off now. It's just a little bit of mud and some winding corners. But for the most part, we've got this one in the bag. I will say though, it is a little bit slow going. Maybe try to avoid some of the mud puddles if possible. That would probably help to speed it up. and just follow this road around, staying to the left on all of the turns. It should take you right over to the warehouse. It can be a bit of a maze back here in the woods, so if you're having any struggles finding your way, just open up the map and mark it out. And we're rounding the last corner. You can see the drop-off boxes right up ahead. Now you don't need to worry too much about stealing the fuel out of it, because completing this task is going to open up a gas station, and it also serves as a repair station. So we can back into that and get refueled, and if you need it, repaired. And then from here we're going to take this fuel trailer and we're going to pull it back down to the sawmill so we can use it while we're doing some work over there. So we'll just head back down the road the exact same way we came in here, and once we get to the other end of it, we'll just pull this trailer up here to the right and we can drop it off here. Now we can just leave the cat here. Let's start tracking the order for logs task, and we'll jump back into the garage and grab a couple of logging trucks that we can use for long logs. So I'm bringing out the Derry 4520 and the Boar. We're going to run these trucks in tandem. We need 2 loads of long logs. If you're playing hard mode, you'll probably just use 1 truck and make this trip twice. But for this situation, we're just going to use 2 and make the trip once. Always make sure you leave your handbrake off of the truck that you're planning to tow. Sometimes the trailer wheels can get locked up on the back truck when you're winched to it, and it just makes it a lot harder to pull. So it's a good practice to leave it turned off. Okay, now to complete this task, we'll need to find a logging station that has long logs, and there actually isn't one in Grainwoods, so we're going to have to head back over to Black Badger Lake, and we'll go to the logging station that's closest to the gateway. So let's follow the highway all the way up to the end, and we'll head through there now. Okay, we're back to Black Badger Lake, and we'll need to back up once we get into the gateway and turn hard to the right. So I'll get the Boar positioned up here to be my towing truck. I'm just making sure I leave enough room for the Derry. And then once again, I'll make sure my handbrake is turned off before I jump into the Boar. That logging station is not too far away. We just need to cruise up the road a little bit, and then we'll get loaded up. The Boar is not really a very fuel efficient truck, and the Derry has a large fuel tank, so that's actually the reason why I'm pulling it with the Boar, because the Boar is going to burn through this fuel no matter what. But the truck that we're towing doesn't really use as much fuel, so the Derry is going to share its fuel source with the Boar along the way. And all we got to do is follow this road that goes down by the river. When you get to the bottom, just cross on the left side again, where you can see the rocks sticking up out of the water. That's usually the best spot for me. Then we'll head right up the hill on the other side of it. It does get a little bit slow moving through here. It's a pretty steep hill. It's probably a good idea to have the all-wheel drive turned on the Derry, just so it does a little better job of helping itself through here. The rocks on this hillside also kind of make it an issue. Your tires end up slipping going up the hill, so that kind of adds to the problem. And then right at the top, there's one last mud hole we have to drive through. This is one of those mud holes that isn't real bad the first time you go through it, but it gets worse each time. It can actually get pretty deep. But now you can see we made it to the logging station, so we're just going to make a loop around, and then we're going to drive these trucks back separately. I've done it the other way, driving them back in tandem, and it just ends up being a lot slower. But before we get loaded, we're going to steal some fuel out of the Derry, and we'll drive up here and get loaded. This will be the first time we've used the Boar for long logs. It does pretty good with it. I should mention that I did add the upgrades to it that we found in the previous episodes, which were the raised suspension and the diff lock. We didn't have those in Yukon, but now that we do, this truck got a little bit better. The raised suspension doesn't actually raise it up that much, but it does make it a bit stiffer, so probably better for heavy hauling like this. You should be able to cruise down the hill on the other side, and I do have the OHD1 tires installed, so they have plenty of grip. I'm actually going to leave the all-wheel drive turned off as much as possible, just to save on some of that fuel, but also to give me a little extra power going up these hills. There are some places where you need to turn it on, but for the most part you can run it in just rear wheel drive. And don't be afraid to try using the diff lock first before all-wheel drive. Sometimes that's enough to do the job. But the hills here in Wisconsin are pretty steep, and a lot of these trucks you can really feel it. We're almost back up to the gateway now. This last section here is kind of a problematic one. I'm going to stay off to the right so I can avoid some of that mud. And then as you can see, there's a lot of boulders on the road here, and they're actually a bit of a pain to get over. So make sure you stay close to the trees in case you need to winch yourself through here. But we made it through. The gateway is just up here to the right. We're gonna pull the Boar up there and just stage it for now. We'll go back and get the Derry before we go through. So we'll leave it right here. Now the Derry might have a little different experience on the way back. This truck has mud tires instead of off-road tires, which in some situations will be an advantage and others probably a disadvantage. This truck also struggles with power. We won't get the top engine upgrade until we get to Maine, so right now it's running with a little bit of an underpowered engine, although the top engine isn't really that much more powerful. It was nice when they finally added it to the game, but they were a little bit skimpy on the specs. This truck would have been quite the powerhouse if they had given it a bit stronger engine. It's actually a really good truck being an 8x8, and it has rear wheel steering, so it's pretty maneuverable too. It's just really lacking in the power department. Although it seems with every new release of the trucks in this game, they keep getting more and more powerful engines. One would think that they could go back and give some of that power to these older trucks that are actually a lot of fun to drive. They're just not utilized very often because of it. Like the P12. I don't know why they did that truck so dirty. Anyway, as you can see, the Derry is doing okay going up the hill, even with all-wheel drive turned off. It has 3 drive axles, and they do a pretty good job of keeping some traction on the ground. And when they do start to slip, just add your diff lock, and occasionally the all-wheel drive. You should be able to get through everything you need to for this. And once we cross this final bridge, just like with the Boar, we're getting to the one problem area. It's a bit of a challenge with these 2 trucks, just to get up this last hill. But just like before, I try to stay to the right, and then I'll cut to the left and get closer to those trees. I'm going to keep my all-wheel drive turned off as long as possible, just to make sure I have the power I need to get up here. But these rocks can be a pain, so you'll probably have to engage it to get over them. Now if you're following along, you might be using completely different trucks for this, and that's totally fine. I'm kind of just taking everybody through some of these different early game trucks and showing what some of their weaknesses are and also their strengths, because every truck does have strengths, and then slowly we'll evolve into the more powerful trucks as the regions get more difficult. Let's give the Boar some fuel, then we'll go through the gateway. Now the last part of this task is actually pretty straightforward. We're just going to follow the highway all the way down until we get to the garage, then we'll turn off and go up into the hills. I guess the main thing you really need to watch out for is just make sure you don't get going too fast and roll your trucks along the way, or smash into the guardrails. But if you take it easy, it shouldn't be any problem from here. The logging station that we got this cargo from only had 2 loads of long logs in it. It was limited. So now that we've taken them out, there's only medium logs there. But fortunately, Black Badger Lake has a few different logging stations that we can use on the future jobs that we need to do over there. So it really shouldn't be any issue at all that we took these out of there. They had to come from somewhere, right? Personally, I think that that's the easiest warehouse to get loaded up. One thing that I wish was different in this game is how the tasks change when you move to different maps. If you're tracking a contract, it usually will stay the same going through the gateway, but if you're following a task, it changes. And I understand it's because the tasks are related to specific maps, unlike the contracts. But like in this situation, we had to travel over there to get logs, and then you have to retrack it when you get over there to find your cargo. And now that we've come back, it's gone back to the invasion task. So now we'll have to stop and track it again. It is kind of a pain, and I wish they would make it a little bit more intuitive so you could avoid those extra steps. But it is what it is. So you can see we need to drop these off at the farmer's house, which is right over by where we did the mobile telephony task. We're just going to follow this dirt road that heads out from the garage area. The drop off isn't too far up the road. There's actually quite a bit of road driving in Wisconsin, it feels like. And yeah, there is some spots where we do a lot of off-roading, but for the most part, the cargo gets shuffled around on either paved roads or dirt roads. I guess in some ways it's kind of nice. I would say Wisconsin is probably the calm before the storm of going into a MR on the next region. But we made it here. We can turn the first one in, and I'm just going to pull the Boar up here out of the way. We can jump into the Derry and we'll get the second one turned in. This is the last task that we're going to be working on in this area, but we have a few more things to do before we finish up this episode. So I'll just park the Derry up here by the Boar, and we can leave these trucks here for now. If you choose to, you could take them back to the garage. That'll be the next place they go. But I'm going to jump into the Paystar 5600. We're going to have to take this back to the garage and get it set up for the next part of our journey. Before I recover this truck, I'm going to use the fuel that's in it to top off the white Western Star, and then the rest of it we'll just dump into this fuel tanker that we left parked over here. Let's head back to the garage and get this thing set up. The first thing I'm going to do is put the top engine in it, and I'm going to use an off-road gearbox. We can add the Ray suspension, and for tires, I'm going to install the JAT MHS5 mud tires. They do have the highest off-road rating out of the group, and we'll need it for climbing up some of these hills. Get an advanced heavy winch, make sure to add the diff lock, snorkels, all-wheel drive, then we can grab a log loader crane and a low saddle. This truck is the first one in our fleet that has the ability to install a log loader crane and a low saddle for pulling a sideboard trailer, which makes it kind of interesting because it gives us the ability to shuffle logs around a little easier. So let's head out of the garage, we'll go over to the trailer store. We're going to grab one of the blue 5-slot sideboard trailers, and we need to load up some medium logs to haul over to the crafting zone. So the first stop in our journey is going to be to the log station to get loaded up with 12 medium logs. The crafting zone will give you 2 wooden planks for each individual log that you have turned in, and we're going to need 24 planks for a future contract, so 12 logs loaded up in the trailer should do the trick for the rest of this map. Now there are quite a few places around here where you can get loaded up with deconstructed wooden houses, but if you remember on the 3rd episode, we took the 4 houses that were all in a row in order to build the wooden bridge on the first map, and the remaining houses are kind of scattered around all over the place out in the woods. It's a real pain to drive around to each location and get the wooden planks out of there. So I like to just craft everything that we need to complete the contracts. We're going to just take this shortcut that follows the railway, and then we'll cut off to the right. We'll follow the road and cross the South Bridge, which was the last one we completed on episode 3. The logging station isn't too far from there. Now if you remember at the end of episode 3 we left the twin steer parked here in the road, and I did drive it up a little ways and park it off to the side just so it wouldn't be in the way. And I'm going to take this cutoff here through the trees. You really don't need to, you can follow the road around, it's probably just as quick. But like I said before, I do try to find ways to make this a little more interesting by taking alternative routes. I guess mostly I'm trying to get you comfortable with taking paths that are not on the road, because when we get to a Mur, we're going to be driving in some pretty nasty places, and it's going to make stuff like this look elementary. So I'm just trying to work your way up to being comfortable with it, because soon enough we won't have a choice. Okay, we made it up here to the logging station. Now we can actually fit 12 medium logs in this trailer. We can do 2 rows of 6, and they'll lay perfectly flat down in the bottom. It works pretty good actually, but I'll pull the trailer up here to the side and disconnect from it. I just want to make sure I leave enough room for my truck to be between the loading station and the trailer. Although we did have a suggestion before in the comments that mentioned if you pull the trailer up next to the loading bay and then have the truck on the outside, you can just reach over it and pick them up and set them in there. I didn't think to try it on this one, but that does sound like a good alternative way to do this. I just have a habit of always having the crane truck in the middle. So let's just get ourselves positioned here and then we'll start loading. I'm going to try to load 2 at a time just to make this go a little quicker. And we got the last of them in there. So as you can see, if you load them up end to end, you can do 6 in the front and 6 in the back. Once you start driving, they'll pretty much all lay down flat. Now leaving here, we're just going to go down the hill through the trees. You can break down any of these trees, so just drive right through the middle if you want. And then when we get to the bottom, we're going to take that same crossing that we used on episode 2 with the Lodestar. If you don't remember where that is or you missed that episode, I'll show you where it's at now. Like I had said before, there is one spot through here that is pretty safe because it's shallow and it's a straight shot across the island. It's right here. The current is kind of strong through here, so make sure you drive through the shallow areas. You don't want to get washed away. The sawmill is just across the river and up the hill. Once you get out the other side, you can just drive straight across the shoreline, and we'll follow this ravine up along the side of the trees. There is a path here. It's a bit unstable and a little bit muddy in some spots, so it might be a good idea to try to stay off to the side of it if you can, but I would say it should be fairly safe. Now we're meeting back up with the main road, and this is once again where that Yeti is supposedly at, and I can never find. Please somebody find it and let me know where it is. I've looked over and over to no avail, and we'll follow it up a little ways. That sawmill is just around the corner. Now I'm sure a lot of you have already seen my previous videos where I've shown how to do this, but if you haven't, basically I just try to pull the trailer up next to the logging bunk, and that's actually where my crane truck will be parked in the end. But we want to tip this trailer over, trying our best to do a controlled tip so the logs don't go flying around all over the place. You just want to make sure you take it real easy when you're tipping it over. If the logs get scattered around everywhere, it makes it a lot harder to clean them all up in the end. So just hook up to the trailer and slowly pull it over. Let them dump out, then we'll disconnect and we'll hook up to the top side of the trailer and just roll it right over the pile. But now I got myself trapped in here. There's not a lot of room in this area to work, so we can do a 15-point turn to get out of here, and I'm just going to hook up to the pole, pull my back end around. Alright, from here we're going to back up in between the logging bunk and the pile that we just created. We'll get all 12 of these turned into the sawmill by loading 3 at a time into the cat, pack them, and turn them in. And now that we have them turned in, we can craft the wooden planks that we need. We'll get 24 of them. And then we got one last thing to do. We'll hook back up to that sideboard trailer. We need to run over to the fuel warehouse that's in the southwest corner, and we're going to load up 3 fuel and bring back over here with us. That way we can be almost completely done with this corner of the map. There will be another time we have to come over here later on for one of the contracts, but that should be it. Other than that, we'll be done. So let's head back down this road and we'll make our way over to that warehouse. This mud hole does get a little bit tore up when you drive through here multiple times, so it might be a good idea to just drive either to the left or the right of how we went through there the first time, to kind of spread it out a little bit. And then just like before, we'll go up over this hill, and instead of crossing the bridge, we'll just drive right down through the ditch. Just follow this road the same as you did the last time. And now that we're up here, we can get topped off with fuel and repair our truck. It's kind of nice to have a repair zone here, although it is way out of the way for anything else that we're doing on the map. But we can grab 3 crates of fuel. We're going to bring these back with us and use one of the storage zones to hold them for later on. By doing it this way, we won't have to come back over into this corner ever again. So let's head back out of here. We'll go past the sawmill and make our way back up to the factory, the railway factory. There's a few sections of the railroad tracks that are out, and we're going to have to craft some later on in order to fix them. So that crafting zone also doubles as a storage zone, just like they did in Yukon. So that'll give us an opportunity to have the 3 fuel that we'll need towards the end, closer to where we're working. I'm just trying to plan ahead a little bit. Now when we're going through the sawmill, we can bring this fuel trailer with us this time, and we'll get this staged a little bit closer to where we'll be working. Just make sure you top off the big cat, because we're going to use that truck later on for another job that's in the area. You shouldn't have any problem pulling it behind the sideboard trailer. The Paystar actually has quite a bit of power. If you can manage to get it into high gear, usually it will hold it. It's just really fuel hungry. The off-road gearbox does exasperate the problem, and I do try to use the high-range gearbox with this truck as much as possible, but it does take a lot of damage with the high-range gearbox because of all the power that it has. So on this map, I have opted to use the off-road in place of it, just to mitigate some of that damage. But in future regions, I will be using the high-range. Otherwise, this thing doesn't get very far on a tank of fuel. Other than that though, it's pretty capable. Being a 10x10 truck, there's not a lot of places that it can't go. It has a lot of ground clearance, fairly large tires, and a wide selection of tires available to it. It can utilize both singles and duals, and it also has some unique options like installing a van body add-on with a low saddle, or being able to utilize the mini crane and a 3-slot flatbed while still being able to pull a trailer. So in my opinion, even though this truck does have a few drawbacks, it also has a lot of very good positive sides to it that make it a pretty good candidate for the things that we need to do. You just got to learn to work with the drawbacks. Now that we're over here to the factory, we can just drop that fuel trailer. We'll be using that later on to get fueled up while we're doing some work here. And then we'll turn this fuel into the storage zone here. Now to craft the rail sections that we'll be doing later on, we'll need 2 metal beams and 4 wooden planks for each section. I believe there's 6 of them that we need in total, so the 24 wooden planks that we just crafted should cover it, and then we'll need to bring 12 metal beams over here. But we'll worry about that on the next one. From here I'm just going to run back over to the garage, which is just right across the road, and sell this trailer off because we won't be utilizing this truck in this configuration anymore. On the next episode, we're going to get started restoring the tracks in this map, so make sure you come back and check it out. That's one of the bigger contracts that we'll be doing, and I'm looking forward to it. We'll see you then, and thanks for watching, everybody.